AI is reshaping things in every single way, right? We're all using it, whether we know it or not. It's embedded already into our day-to-day activities and our day-to-day lives in a variety of ways. In the workplace, I mean, one of the things, again, that we focus on is it's really important to continue to grow our human skills in the workplace, especially alongside AI. We know that there are so many skills that directly relate to good ethical usage of AI. And we have agency as humans in how we use that. Answer your question about how it's changing at a speed that is unimaginable and week to week, right? If you take an AI course today to understand what are the basics and what's going on, you take that 2 weeks from now and it could be very different. So, so one of the things that is changing is we are able, not everyone's maximizing it yet, but we are able to automate so many tasks that are mundane and repetitive. And so what that can do is that can shore up time, right? And I think the biggest challenge today is what do you do with that time? Employees today are already so burned out, right? We are running. And with AI, we are continuing to run. AI is helping us to alleviate time. But if we're filling that time with more, then employees are just going to continue to get burned out. So it's really taking that time to assess where we are as an employee.
What other steps can organizations take to maintain a human-centered approach while adopting AI technologies? And maybe you can talk a little bit about what the human-centered approach is and how we can bring more of that into the workplace.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of definitions of human-centered approach, right? We have human-centered design, we have human computer interaction, we have all these different ways of talking about human-centeredness. In the context that we use it at the Human Group, it's really around intentionality. Because if we are not intentional in these days where we have incredibly dispersed workforces, right, across geographies and time zones, and if we are not intentional about leading with the organizational values, as hopefully employees are aligned with those organizational values, but we need to be intentional about aligning with those values-based actions, right? And enabling us to stay connected as a workplace takes intention. So to take that intentional time is really important. To focus on things like curiosity, right? We've lost a lot of curiosity in the workplace, and in the age of AI, this is really important. We have to know how to be curious. And as new generations are coming up, there is a little bit of a loss in curiosity. So how can we nurture that? That helps us be more connected with our fellow employees as well. And, we talk a lot about connection in the workplace. And what is connection in the workplace? The immediate response is, this is how I am connected to you, Jaya, if we're on a team together, right? A person-to-person connection. But it goes much deeper than that, right? We can be connected to our team. We can be connected to the work we do. We can be connected to the mission and vision of an organization. And we can also be connected to the environment in which we work, right? If we are connected through all of those anchors, chances are very high we're going to love our job and we're going to stay at our job. If we are connected by only one of those, for example, I love the work I do, yet all of those other pieces aren't strong, there are still weak links there on whether or not you may thrive in that place and that organization. And so it's a combination of individual and organizational alignment to figure out how do we increase all of those connecting anchors to ensure, again, it really does come down to a lot of employee health and well-being and retention and engagement and productivity and growth. Historically, that's really how trust may have been built, is organically, right? Because I had lunch with this colleague so often that eventually I got to know them so well, or my boss, right? And therefore I feel like I have a very trusted relationship with that person. It needs to be at the forefront of thinking. It needs to be very, very intentional. And the way we do that is to understand really what a low trust environment looks like, and the pitfalls and the challenges that could arise from a low trust environment. And so we want a high trust environment. And so what does it take to get to a high trust environment? And it takes continual learning. What does it look like for my organization and my team to be high trust? And that may look a little different for team A than team B, right? But it's coming up with, what does trust look like for my team? And from there, taking those steps to keep reinforcing that at every single meeting that we come together. And that could be under our core values as a team. And let's make sure we are leading with those core values as a team every time we come together and we meet. It's really embracing the fact that everyone on a team has some value to add, and that it is very important to embrace difference. If we are going to innovate, we need to absolutely embrace that difference, because that is the only way we're going to achieve innovation, and to not and to ensure that we have a platform in which we can fail. There's so many great tools out there right now, but I think one thing that I always like to pose to everyone is, we talk about AI as a tool, but AI can also be a teammate. And so if we think of AI more as a teammate that also has an opinion, it is not going to take over our agency. It is going to be one opinion of that team, right? So the basic tools, if you're not using yet, please experiment and make sure you're getting on, right? ChatGPT, Claude, all the different tools that are out there. I'll start using them. We need women using AI today, right? And helping to define AI. So that's very important. But when we start to get on using these tools, we need to think of those answers that come back as another opinion, right? So if myself, Jaya, Neha, and Monica are all on a team, and we're all thinking the same thing, right? We're all moving towards a goal. We say, let's see what Claude has to say about this, right? Or even name your AI as its own name, right? And then think about whether that output is something to consider or not, right? AI is getting smarter and better by the minute, but there still are hallucinations, and we still need to validate what we see back as those answers from AI. AI is going to shape the economy in 1,000 different ways. And AI is it already embedded in most things that we do today, and it's just going to continue to accelerate. So I think it's going to, if you take it back to the individual level, right? AI is going to continue to cause a lot of shift and unpredictable economic forces. I think is probably the key there. Is we can't predict what's going to be happening yet, but it is shifting and changing, and we're seeing a lot of movement and growth as a result of it. That is really hard to even imagine, and because the scale is pretty and pretty incredible. One of the founders of AI, if you want to call it that, is Dr. Fei Li. She came out of Stanford, and if you look her up and listen to some of her, I think she's got a lot of YouTube videos out there from various conferences that she has spoken at. She talks a lot about, we have agency as human beings. We have agency. AI isn't just going to come in and take over unless we let it, right? Humans have agency. And one of the biggest things in the coming year is going to really be, what is humans' relationship with AI, and how do we build that and design?
My question to you is what would you like to advise as moms who are trying to re-enter workforce?
Mhm. Oh, so many things. I think one thing in particular from the course, the course I teach at Stanford draws it's an open course to anyone. It's once a year only, so it's not until either fall or winter next year. But one of the things that the majority that come into that course are are women that are working with small children, and they've hit this point of how do I do it all? Right. And also, people that attend that course are those that are looking to return into the workplace and also wondering, how am I going to do it all? Right. And so, two things that come up during that course. The first is we really get grounded in the facts and the data, period. Understanding what is a motherhood penalty and how does it impact me in the workplace? What is the pay gap, which is really ultimately a pay gap between parents, mothers, and fathers when you really dig into the details. Because as soon as women have children, their pay decreases by 6%, while fathers' pay increases by 4%. And that's really bias driven, by the way. It's all bias driven. It's nothing to do with the um, the work or output of either. So it's understanding that data and also looking at things like policies that aid or impede women and mothers, because there are a lot of policies that sound really great, but ultimately they do not aid, they impede mothers. For example, when you're looking at maternity leave but no paternity leave, that is also in an organization, that does not necessarily aid women in the long run from the standpoint of equity in the home. Um, that's why we push towards paid parental leave for both mothers, fathers, equal time out, and normalizing that too. So I think it's really important to do research on the culture of a company. I think some companies are very forward thinking and understand that innovation does come from a wide range of lived experiences. And then there's another type of organization that may not put a lot of value on that. And I think that's really important to discern when looking at returning to work and determining who those companies are and where they are. Remember, this is about we, not me. And I think that also relieves a lot of guilt that we have as mothers. Particularly in the US, mothers face more guilt than any other country in the world. And that is because we are an individualized society, which says if there's challenges, that's you to work out. That is your problem. That is your issue. But when we all come together and realize, wow, this is not just because I can't manage my time well or I can't get it together. It goes much deeper than that. So that's the first thing. Remember the power of we, right? Versus me. I think the other thing to think about is we talk a lot about work-life balance this, and balance doesn't exist, right? There is no such thing as work-life balance, but there is work-life conflict, right? We do face work-life conflict, and women face more work-life conflict than men. And if you look at the history, that kind of goes back into why. It's because women tend to have this conflict between, in sociological terms, it's called family devotion versus work devotion, right? And when we are not devoted to family, we feel guilt. When we are not devoting ourselves to work and living up to what's known as the ideal worker stand, the ideal worker syndrome, which says, I'm devoted to work 24/7. I'm always here and I'm always available. It's impossible to be both the family devotion and the work devotion model. And so, from that context, it's that conflict we need to break down, and we need to understand that it's just a social construct that we need to decide for ourselves what works, right? The other big piece in the course a whole module we devote to it, is gender equity in the home. And this can be really challenging for a lot. But one of the reasons why it's so, once women have stepped out of the workplace and are looking to re-enter the workplace, as a mother, right, who has stepped out, chances are fairly high you are managing all the things in that home, right? And it is a full-time job. So when we think about going back into paid work, we're thinking, how can I possibly have two full-time jobs? So it is really having those hard conversations around what is going to shift in that home environment and how can we look to partner in different ways and more equitable ways. Equity means fair, versus equal is 50-50, right? So whatever is equitable in one person's home might be different than was equitable in another person's home, but it's around finding that balance of what feels equitable to each. And so those hard conversations are really important and really impact our work and our paid work, right? So a lot has to change for women in the workplace. A lot has to change at home for us to continue to drive and be successful in the workplace.
I mean, what role does emotional intelligence play in staying connected at work, and how can we balance it with the use of AI?
Right. I heard something really interesting the other day. There's been a lot of talk about emotional intelligence, EQ this, EQ that, and absolutely incredibly important work to develop that empathy piece, right? And I think more and more that's important. But one thing that also came up is, you know, empathy is one thing, but compassion is another, right? And really developing compassionate leaders is really important. And the hard part about a lot of those terms is that terms like empathy and compassion um, and, and others have been feminized because women by nature have been felt to have been better at those things. And so those terms have been feminized so that when men as leaders are described as compassionate and empathetic, it's a matter of language and it's viewed as not as important of a leadership trait, if this makes sense. While we know, and while we know all the research says that these are incredibly important leadership traits. So the role that it plays in AI is really around continuing to develop those skill sets in all our leaders so that, again, we can be ethically and reasonably and effectively using AI in our day-to-day lives, I think, and of also in our organizations. Ultimately, I believe that partnering with the right organization is critical. Doing that research up front, right? In terms of this reentry into the workplace, doing that research up front and understanding more about that organization, not just we have to all be very careful on what organizations say, right, on their website and all these things. And then continue to assess clues in other ways, right? Around who this organization is, what they're all about, what are their values. Or all organizations do publish a set of core values. And that's very important, right? Again, back to this connection issue for us to love our jobs, which we all want, right? We all want to love the work we do. We need to not only be connected to the actual work, right? you find it challenging and exciting, but we also need to be connected to our teammates, right? And connected to the environment in which we work, meaning that, I have a home office. I'm very connected. I like to be in my home office. This is my space, right? And also connected to the mission and vision of that organization in which you work. So really thinking deeply on those four anchoring factors is really important as you take that leap towards more paid work.